welcome to Watch Symposium. I'm Austin. Rolex Rapers. Alright, well that was going to be the original title for this video. Rolls off the tongue, but it's a little dark. So let's just say Rolex Pillagers. What am I talking about? Well, Rolex watches, well, they're expensive. They're going up in value. They sell for a lot. They're highly collectible. I'm not saying anything you don't already know, but the same could be said of Rolex parts. In fact, Rolex parts is a whole separate economy, and Rolex parts are not cheap. Far from it. They're very expensive. Bracelets go for over $1,000. Links for $100. Bezel inserts can be in the thousands. I saw a GMT bezel insert in Nakano recently. It was 4,000 USD. So you don't want to throw away these pieces. And I suspect that there are some people who are what I would call a Rolex pillager. And that's that they get a piece and they change out the bezel insert. Maybe they put an aftermarket bracelet on it. They switch out as many parts as they can. They sell the watch. And they can sell the watch for maybe a tad below what it would sell for if it was whole. But then they've got all these parts left over. You could take the bracelet, you could sell it for over $1,000, a couple hundred for the insert, and maybe whatever other part you nicked from the piece, and you've increased your bottom line by well over 1,000 USD. What's wrong with it? Well, you screwed over the piece. You didn't do right by the piece, and you've sent out into the world a compromised piece that will never be whole again. If you love these pieces, the idea of that makes you sick, all right? And you see this, I suspect, on eBay. Becker time. Becker time. All right, well, am I saying Becker time does this? I'm not saying that, but I'm sure as hell not saying that they don't do it. I'm just saying that I don't know. But they have highly compromised pieces, you find. And I will say, do we have a code red here? No, this is a code yellow, because what makes it not a code red is that they own up to it in the fine print. All right, and we're going to talk about that. Let's look at a couple pieces. First of all, this GMT Master 2, it's a Coke. Now, right off the bat, we can see that the bracelet's gone. Now, where's the bracelet? Was that switched out? Honestly, it just didn't come to them with a bracelet. Possibly, is the bracelet sitting in a drawer at Becker Time waiting to be sold? I don't know, okay? If so, then we got a Rolex Pillager, all right? But again, we don't know. What else is wrong with this piece? All right, well, if you look at the bezel insert, check out those twos. Those are hooked twos. This is an aftermarket bezel insert. Where's the original? That original would probably go for, oh man, a fat font with the serifs, 250 at least, depending on how faded it is, all right? So where is it? Where is it? It's a great question. Now, everything else looks fine, but of course, it's not. When you read the fine print, you can see that it's got an aftermarket sapphire crystal as well. And can you sell a crystal? Well, absolutely. I mean, crystals in the mid-2000s, or I guess I should say from the mid-2000s or early 2000s, have the LEC, the laser engraved coronet. And so if you have that on your crystal and you're selling it, well, that's a good thing, okay? A regular crystal is like 20 bucks, but laser engraved coronet crystal would be, I'm just ballparking it here, but a couple $100 at the very least. And this doesn't have that, all right? So again, they own up to it if you're just willing to read the fine print, or if you know what you're doing. A lot of people don't, and so they might read something like this talking about the bezel. It says, Rolex stainless steel bezel features a custom added 24-hour black and red, quote, Coke bezel insert. Custom, that's an interesting choice of words. This is an aftermarket bezel insert. It's not a custom bezel insert. I mean, custom has that nuance of you hired somebody to make it, especially for this piece, and that's not the case with this bezel insert. It's a bad aftermarket, made in China, probably cost $10 and probably cost about $1 to make. And to call it custom, again, it just sort of paints it in more favorable light than I think it deserves. But if you know your terms, you know what it means, and credit to them. They might not be wholly unethical. They're sort of straddling the line there, I think, but they are disclosing that it's not original, all right? And that's how they get away with it. All right, now, is it just this piece? Absolutely not. I mean, you'll find that more often than not, they're selling compromised pieces like this 1500. And let's go through it. It's on the face of beautiful watch if you don't know anything about Rolex watches. Now you can see here under dial it says Rolex dial with raised stick markers has been professionally refinished in blue. Now refinishing is a totally separate thing. It's not nearly as egregious as pillaging parts, far from it. But again, people might look at this and say, wow, it is a beautiful blue dial. I mean, it looks perfect. It looks new. Well, yeah, it looks new because somebody painted on it. And we want original dials. We don't want custom dials. We don't want refinished dials. We don't want anybody painting our dials except for Rolex. And again, if you don't know much about watches, a refinished dial is sort of like a polished case. I mean, you can give a watch a bad polish and a pretty bad refinish on the dial as well. Somebody not knowing what they're looking at might look at it and say, looks new, look at it, no scratches, no dings, no dents. I'm buying this piece. And in reality, they're getting a watch with uneven lugs, with the lines gone, and just a piece that you and I would avoid. So again, refinishing, not ideal. But again, we're looking at a company that's not above sprucing up a piece if it means an increase in their bottom line. And you gotta question how ethical that is from the standpoint of the piece itself. All right, continuing on, check out that bracelet. Well, there's no taper there, there's no coronet on the clasp. That's clearly an aftermarket band. It says stainless steel Jubilee style bracelet with plain clasp, and then they say no Rolex markings. Okay, again, they're disclosing it. Good for them, good for them. This band is not made by Rolex as it is a custom aftermarket band. Okay, custom aftermarket. We're splitting the difference there, but again, they do a pretty good job of letting you know this is aftermarket. And then of course the aftermarket acrylic crystal, aftermarket crystal. And my guess is that that was just replaced to make it look better, okay? I don't think there's probably anything nefarious about that. And really, it's a judgment. I mean, if you've got a scratched up acrylic crystal, but it's original, if you replace it with an aftermarket crystal, then it's going to sell better, okay? More people are going to be interested in it. And so, are you compromising the piece? Well, it depends. If you include the crystal that you switched out, then we're good. We're good. Are they doing that? I don't think they are. What happened to that acrylic crystal? I don't know. So it's a good question. And then we've got, lastly, this 16610 date sub. And everything looks okay here except for the sapphire crystal. So anyway, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes at Becker Time. But I will say that this GMT Master 2 is about the same price as an uncompromised piece. So if they do have those parts, then they're not making it cheaper because there are a bunch of aftermarket parts on it. They're selling it for the same price, and then they've got all these parts potentially, possibly, speculatively, that they're keeping and could sell or use later. I mean, think of the parts that they can acquire, and I mean, if they do this with every piece and then they sell that piece for about what a legitimate whole piece goes for, and then they just keep all these parts, I mean, think about all of those original fat font serifed inserts and the bracelets and the clasps and the links and the crystals and whatever else they're doing. Again, it could be a whole other economy going on eBay that is sort of out the back door. Again, speculating, I don't know, but they do have a hell of a lot of compromised pieces. I will say that, Becker Time. And look, who buys their watches from Becker Time? It's the person who's new to watches, the newbie, the uneducated buyer that is more worried about getting a fake watch than anything. That's what they're focused on. And they go to the Becker Time eBay site, and it's slick and it's convincing, and their spiel is good, and they have they have mentions in like legitimate and highbrow publications and media that make the brand really credible. And they are, in a sense, that I don't think you're going to get a fake piece, but it's the kind of spiel that would make a new buyer really comfortable, overly comfortable, to where they wouldn't even notice the fine print here. And look, they would have to know their terms: aftermarket, custom. I mean, a lot of people will see custom as a favorable thing. It's toxic when it comes to Rolex, but if you don't know what you're doing, it could actually pump up the piece, right? So that's who's buying these pieces. And look, they have a whole system where you can sell back your watch and upgrade. And so once you're in the Becker Time loop, you might never get out, and you might stay there happily ignorant, never knowing that you've got a compromised piece full of aftermarket parts because you didn't bother to really look into it or educate yourself. And look, I'm sure there are customers like that, and what they don't know, I guess, doesn't hurt them, unless they go to sell that piece and don't know enough about it to explain to you that it's got aftermarket parts on it that are maybe not visible, and then you buy it only to have RSCs say that it's got a bunch of aftermarket parts, so we need to replace. And you think, God, I really wish I had the original bezel insert or something. Okay, so what's going on here, we can only speculate. Kind of interesting, but just be careful on eBay. I think that's the main message here. I certainly don't want you to think this is limited to Becker Time. I think you see it a lot on eBay. You see it right here. This is Swiss Time Buyers. They've got a rating of 100%, but look at the insert on this GMT. It's a aftermarket hooked to insert. And you can see from here that this is a really well-polished piece. And if you didn't believe me, then check out the clasp. You can barely make out the cornet. Just kind of funny, still present, but man, that has done some time under the polishing wheel. Now, the video is officially over, but if you want to stick around and hear about some of the drama that happens behind the scenes here at Watch Symposium, here we go. All right, well, first let me issue an apology for, well, it's not a thought crime, it was a thought accusation to James over at Showcase Watches. What am I talking about? Well, yesterday I was watching an Archie live stream, and James let it be known that he sold all of his Rolex watches aside from his Batman. Why the hell would you do that? I don't know. That's a separate video. But included in that bunch of sold watches was a recently purchased 16700. That's a Pepsi GMT. And funnily enough, it's his second 16700 that he's purchased and that he's sold. And this is the second video I've made after one of those sales talking about Showcase Watches and James and his decision. Link in the description to that video the first time I did it. What I said in that video stands this time around as well, but that's not what we're talking about. All right, so in the chat, he wrote that the bezel insert didn't go with it. And just to let you know what was the case is he switched out the original for, I don't think it was an aftermarket, I think it was a replacement bezel insert. And the reason he did that was just to make the watch a little bit more wearable. He wouldn't have to worry about banging the original or dinging it up. Just tuck that away, keep it nice, and wear the aftermarket insert. And that's it. And so I read this as he had sold the watch with the service insert and kept the original. And instantly, I was in a funk. It was weird. I actually got depressed. Why? It just depressed me to think that there was a 16700 released into the wild that was compromised, unwhole. It made me sad. It messed up my night, to be honest. I couldn't shake it. I went over to his channel and I sent him a note, and I asked him, I said, you sold your 16700. Did you keep the original insert? If so, why did you do that? And with bated breath, I waited for a response. My Rolex Pillager popper was cocked. I waited, and he wrote back, and he said, no, he did include it. And I sighed a sigh of relief, and I felt happy again. And I wasn't surprised. I was more shocked and surprised at the thought that James would do this, because he's an honest guy. He's a straight shooter. I like him a lot. And I thought at the very least he had just forgot to put it back on and remembered it after the fact, of which I would have encouraged him to at least try to get it back to the watch. But he was one step ahead of me, and he did the right thing. You know, if I ever sell one of my GMTs, you can best be sure that I'll include the original fat font serifed bezel inserts too. Absolutely. Why? Because I love those pieces. I love those pieces. It would hurt my heart to think that they left my steed worse off than when they came. And look, wear, scratches from wear, nicks and dings, those are par for the course. I don't care about that. But to think I would release one of those watches and kind of keep back that bezel insert, and that watch would go off into the wild and never be whole again, I couldn't do it. All right, that's not to say that I wouldn't charge an arm and a leg for the fact that it has an original bezel insert. I'd point that out, and that person would pay for it, absolutely. But I would never do that, and I'm sure many of you guys wouldn't as well. I think it's almost a psychopathic move to get a watch and to do that to it, and to move it on, right? And to compromise a piece like that for $1. I mean, it's a psychopathic move. And you know, I tend to look at these watches as little living entities, and I know they're not, okay? I figured it out, they're not, but I love them as if they were, and I get sad for them. And it was kind of interesting, my reaction to what I thought was an injustice by Showcase Watches on a 16700. It kind of surprised me, you know? What the hell do I care what happens to some random GMT in Britain who made me the moral arbiter of GMTs around the world? I don't know, I just love the pieces, and I love to see them whole and intact and respected and uncompromised. Let me know what you think. Take care. Thanks for watching. See you next time.